Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you. Welcome to today's session. And today, as you can see, we will be covering chapter 4 from the textbook Honeydew, which is Bepin Choudhury's Lapse of Memory. So, just like last time, we are going to go through the summary and analysis of the chapter in today's session. And then in another session, we will be covering all the questions or some of the questions from your textbook. So, for all those of you who have read the chapter, this summary is really going to help you understand it better. For those of you who haven't, it can also work the other way around, where you go through the summary and then read the chapter. And again, this information will help you understand it a lot better. So, before we get started with the summary and analysis, I want you to take a look at the author of this story. It's Satyajit Ray. Now, Satyajit Ray was an Indian film director, screenwriter, author, lyricist, and just a very, very talented man. And he is recognized worldwide as one of the greatest Indian filmmakers. He has written, directed, produced some amazing films. And he has also written some amazing stories, and we're lucky to have one of them as part of our syllabus. So, without further ado, let's get right to it. So here, now lapse of memory is a part of is a part of the name of your chapter, and yes, so lapse by itself means a mistake that you make because you forget something. But a lapse of memory means forgetting something important. So as you can see, a period of time when a person forgets things that he or she should have remembered. Okay? And just for your information, because this story it has been translated, you might find this with different titles and names in different places, but in our textbook it's Bepin Choudhury's Lapse of Memory, so it's important to understand what lapse of memory means. Alright, so it's forgetting something that one should have remembered, and this can be for a period of time. Okay, so and this might happen to a lot of us. We generally forget things like people's birthdays. I have forgotten people's names, the people that I've met only briefly, and we forget where we've kept something. Maybe we enter a room and we forget why we've entered that room. So such lapses of memory are common, they happen. But would you ever forget something very, very important in your life, like maybe a trip that you took with your family somewhere? That's very unlikely, right? We usually don't forget such things. So in this chapter, Bepin Choudhury does have some trouble with his memory, and he seems to have forgotten an entire trip to Ranchi, which is very, very unlikely for him. So let's get into it and see why this happened. Was Bepin Choudhury losing his mind? Was he, slowly going crazy? What was going on? All right, let's find out. So this chapter is divided into 4 parts in your textbook. So we're going to go accordingly. So let's begin with part 1. Okay, now here, when the chapter begins by telling us what Bepin Choudhury usually did every Monday. So every Monday after work, Bepin Choudhury or Bepin Babu made a trip to New Market, to this place called Kali Charan's, where he bought books. And the author tells us that Bepin Choudhury loved reading. He was not a very extroverted, friendly kind of a person. He didn't usually mix around a lot, did not have a lot of friends, and lived alone, and thoroughly enjoyed reading. So he needed at least 5 books to get him through the week. So on Monday, he was getting all the books that he needed to fill his quota for the week. So Bepin Babu, the main character of our story, entered a bookstore that he frequently visited, and there, as he was going about his business, a man approached him, and as you can see, saying, "I don't suppose you recognize me." Alright, and so this was supposedly an old acquaintance of Bepin Babu, Parimal Ghosh. And Parimal Ghosh claimed that he knew Bepin Babu from Bepin Babu's Ranchi trip. Now, This confused Bepin Babu. Bepin Babu was like, I've never been to Ranchi before. What do you mean I know you from my Ranchi trip? And chose not to believe Parimal Ghosh. He assumed that this is just some random person messing with him. And so he chose to ignore Parimal Ghosh. But then Parimal Ghosh started giving Bepin Babu more details. And he said, do you not remember this trip you took to Ranchi in 1958? You were there with another one of your friends. We even went to Honeydew Falls. And this started confusing Bepin Babu quite a bit. Alright? So, there we go. At first, Bepin Babu says, have we met before? Do I know who you are? And Parimal Ghosh says, we met every day for a whole week. I arranged for a car to take you to the Honeydew Falls in 1958 in Ranchi. My name is Parimal Ghosh. Now, what's the shocking bit here? Bepin Babu had no memory of this so-called trip to Ranchi. Then, when Bepin Babu continued to deny that, no, I've never been to Ranchi, Parimal Ghosh started giving him a lot of personal information. He said, don't you remember that we sat and talked and you told me that you do not have any kids? You told me that your wife passed away years ago and that you lived alone and that you had a brother who was in an insane asylum, and which is the reason why you don't want to visit the asylum in Ranchi. So this is a lot of personal information for some random person to have about you, right? So this really confused Bepin Babu. He was taken aback, and then he was like, you know what, still, you're making a mistake. One often does. I've never been to Ranchi. So Bepin Babu was convinced that he had never been to Ranchi. Now, this man, Parimal Ghosh, says, what are you saying, Mr. Choudhury? You had a fall in Honeydew and cut your right knee. Alright, and then he also said that a man called Dinesh Mukherjee was also there on the same trip with you. Now, Dinesh Mukherjee was a man that Bepin Babu knew. So, this random person, Parimal Ghosh, is giving Bepin Babu all of this information that is true, except for the fact that Bepin Babu claims that he had never been to Ranchi. Okay, so Bepin Babu ignored this man and went about his life as usual. Okay, and with that, we get to part 2 of the story. So essentially what happens in part 1 is that Bepin Babu, who loved reading, was just going about his day when a random man called Parimal Ghosh claimed to have known him from Bepin's trip to Ranchi. Okay, now here we are. So, at first, Bepin Babu chose to ignore whatever happened and thought it was just a mistake that some person is making. But then he continued to think about it, and it continued to bother him. And soon Bepin Babu thought that he was losing his mind. How could he not remember having been to Ranchi? Okay, and he could not. The one thing that stuck with him was, how did he know all of this personal information about me? So he chose to check if he actually had a cut on his right knee, and when Bepin Babu checked, he did have a cut there. Now, he could not remember how he got it. Maybe he fell as a child and got the cut, who knows? But why did this random person at the bookstore know that he had a cut? So if he had never been to Ranchi, if he had never actually visited the Honeydew Falls and never actually fallen there, how did he end up getting a cut on his right knee? Okay, so even the next day, he could not stop thinking about this, and finally he was like, should I maybe call Dinesh Mukherjee and check if we actually did go to Ranchi? But then he also doubted himself there, thinking that if I call Dinesh Mukherjee, then Dinesh Mukherjee might think that I've gone crazy. Now here, it is important to understand, and the author does this in the story, that Bepin Babu was a very intelligent, conscientious man, and he had an impeccable memory. And there are many instances in the story, and we'll look at them. So it's just important for you to remember that Bepin Babu's character has been portrayed in such a way that he was very fond of reading. If he could go through 5 books in a matter of a week, that truly meant that his brain, his mind was in a great state. So this particularly really bothered him, because if you think that your brain is working perfectly and then all of a sudden an incident like this happens, it will really throw you off. So that's essentially what happened with Bepin Babu. Okay, but then he did, so in order to confirm and find out what's going on, Bepin Babu did eventually call Dinesh Mukherjee, and Dinesh Mukherjee confirmed that they had gone to Ranchi in 58. So now that's two people claiming that Bepin Babu was in fact in Ranchi in 1958. Now, Bepin Babu could not digest the fact that he could forget an entire trip that he took, and it was not that long ago. Maybe, I think it mentioned 6 or 7 years ago, right? So Bepin Babu had an excellent memory, but he somehow forgot an entire trip to Ranchi. That concludes part 2 of the story. Now, moving on to part 3. So, Bepin Babu, there's a bit where the author, Satyajit Ray, explains that Bepin Babu was working for this one organization where he had a very responsible job. So he was going to office every day. In fact, he had just conducted a meeting where he spoke for half an hour and nothing had ever gone wrong at work. Okay, so if Bepin Babu had something seriously wrong with his brain, why had nothing gone wrong during his work all this while, right? But Bepin Babu simply could not shake off the fact that he couldn't remember going to Ranchi, which obviously is very shocking, would be for anybody. And now, so here we get introduced to a new character. This character is Chunilal. So Bepin Babu, sitting at home wondering what's wrong with him, gets a visit from Chunilal. And here we find out that this person Chunilal went to school with Bepin Babu, and he was struggling in the recent past. He needed a job and he kept reaching out to Bepin Babu for a job. But Bepin Babu denied, he did not help him out, and he kept saying that I can't do anything for you, and started ignoring Chunilal. So while Bepin Babu was busy thinking about what's wrong with his mind, Chunilal showed up at his house again. Now every time Chunilal showed up, Bepin Babu followed the same protocol. He asked his servant to tell him that he's busy, he's not available, and he can't meet him right now. So he asked his servant to do the same thing. But then suddenly he realized, okay, I have known Chunilal for a long time. Maybe he will be able to confirm if I have been to Ranchi or not. So Bepin Babu meets Chunilal and then asks him, hey, do you remember what I was doing in 58? Did I make a trip to Ranchi? Now here, Chunilal says, I was a travel agent at that time, and in fact I was the one who booked your tickets to Ranchi and planned the entire trip out for you. I dropped you off to the station. Something in your compartment was not working and I fixed it for you. And of course I remember that you went to Ranchi in 58. How could you forget? So now this is the third person who has confirmed that Bepin Babu indeed made a trip to Ranchi in 58. And Chunilal was actually quite shocked that Bepin Babu did not remember going to Ranchi in 58. And now this really threw Bepin Babu off, right? So here we can see that conversation. You're sure that I did go to Ranchi? Do you mean you have doubts about having gone at all? Now, so Chunilal is shocked. You're like, are you really doubting yourself? Of course you went to Ranchi. Okay. So now Bepin Babu seriously starts doubting himself, and as he gets extremely worried, he decides to go visit a doctor. So Bepin Babu went to a doctor called Paresh Chanda and explained his situation to him, and the doctor said, okay, this is very weird. I've never come across a case like this before, that you remember everything else but have specifically forgotten this one trip that you made to Ranchi. So the doctor said that I've never dealt with anything like this before, so I wouldn't know exactly what to do. But I think that if you were to go back to Ranchi, maybe seeing the place will help you remember that you had actually been there before. Hmm. Okay, so now this seemed like a good idea. So Bipin Babu decided to book a first class ticket and make a trip to Ranchi. And here we are in the final part of the story. So far it's quite odd that a man with such impeccable memory who's still reading and working a responsible job has completely forgotten a trip that he took. So now let's see what actually happened. So Bipin finally visited Ranchi in the hope that he will be able to remember his trip from 58. But as soon as he got out of the train, nothing seemed familiar. So if you revisit a place that you visited before, you'll know where certain things are, you'll know what the city looks like. So Bipin Babu had no memory of ever having visited this city. Everything seemed strange and as if he was seeing it for the very, very first time. So soon Bipin Babu gave up hope. He said, okay, I've gone crazy. There's no more, this is it. But then he decides to maybe make a trip to Hundru Falls. Going to Hundru Falls might help him remember falling and getting a cut on his knee and whatnot. So he decides that, okay, I've come all the way here. Let me try this out as well. And he takes his trip to Hundru Falls as his final shot. And then what do we see in the story? We see that Bipin Babu fainted in Hundru Falls. Now, we don't exactly know why he fainted. There is no explicit reason given for it, but we just know that he faints. Some Gujarati tourists help him, and the first thing he says after regaining consciousness is, that's it, or I've lost all hope now. Something along those lines. So we know that Bipin Babu is now convinced that he has lost his mind. So Bipin Babu comes back to Calcutta, and because he fell and fainted in Hundru Falls, he actually injured himself quite badly. So he decides to call Dr. Chanda and say that, I couldn't remember anything, I've lost my mind, plus I've injured myself. And Bipin Babu was just panicking when his servant came up to him and gave him a letter. Okay, so just before the doctor arrived, Bipin Babu called the doctor. Just before the doctor arrived, the Bipin Babu's servant gave him a letter. Okay, and the letter was marked urgent and confidential. So confidential means it's a secret. No one else should be reading this, just for you. So urgent and confidential. And so Bipin Babu opened the letter and he read it. Now let's read what the letter said together. Okay, dear Bipin, I had no idea that affluence would bring about the kind of change in you that it has done. Was it so difficult for you to help out an old friend down on his luck? I have no money, so my resources are limited. What I have is imagination, a part of which I used in retribution of your unfeeling behavior. Well, you'll be all right again now. A novel I've written is being considered by a publisher. If he likes it enough, it'll see me through the next few months. Yours, Chunilal. Alright, so what actually happened here? Chunilal, and here let's go through a few meanings first to understand. Affluence means because Bipin Babu is doing so well, he had a nice job, he had money, he had luxury. So affluence means having having more than what is required. So having a lot of money, a lot of luxuries in life. And then we have retribution over here, which means punishment. Retribution means punishment. Okay. And unfeeling behavior means not because Bipin did not help out Chunilal. Unfeeling behavior here means not having sympathy or empathy for your friend who is in need, or not feeling bad for your friend who requires your help. Alright, so it was actually Chunilal who had been reaching out to Bipin Babu for so long for a job that Bipin Babu refused. Bipin Babu could have easily helped Chunilal out, but he refused to do that. And now this was Chunilal's way of either getting revenge or giving, the Chunilal uses the word retribution. But here in some way, Chunilal justifies this as giving Bepin Babu a taste of his own medicine, or just punishing him for not being there as a friend for Chunilal. Alright, and so everything that Bepin Babu went through was actually a setup, a trap, or a prank that Chunilal came up with. So Chunilal was the one who sent Parimal Ghosh. Chunilal has known Bepin Babu ever since they were in school. So he obviously knew all these personal details about his life. And Chunilal also probably called up Dinesh Mukherjee and asked him to confirm that, or lie that they had gone to Ranchi in 58. Alright, so now we know that Bepin Babu didn't actually forget, but he was made to believe like he had forgotten. And because we know, the author sets up a character sketch or tells us exactly what kind of a person Bepin Babu was. And we know that he loved, like we've gone through this so many times now, he loved reading, he was very good at his job, and in general he was just very proud of his brain, the way it functioned, and his memory. So Chunilal attacked him right where he knew it would hurt. Alright, so then right after reading the letter, the doctor arrived, and what does Bepin Babu do? Bepin Babu told the doctor that, you were right. As soon as I went to Ranchi, I remembered that I'd been there before and everything just came back to me. So Bepin Babu lied to the doctor and then said, but the reason why I've called you is because I fell in Undru Falls and now I need painkillers for the pain. So the author doesn't exactly tell us how Bepin Babu felt after reading the letter. The author doesn't tell us the reaction of Bepin Babu right after reading the letter, but just tells us what Bepin Babu said to the doctor. So now it is up to us to infer or assume what Bepin Babu must have felt. And that brings us to the end of our story. So in the end, we find out that all of this was a prank done by Chunilal because Bepin Babu refused to help him out. So that's all. That's the summary and analysis of this chapter. That went by rather quickly, and this was a really interesting story. There are obviously humorous bits in it, the fact that everything was a prank, but it's also very telling about a lot of other things, like how we can be so deeply affected by what the people around us tell us and how we can start doubting ourselves. It also tells us more about what people in our lives are capable of doing, and how we should also not be too selfish, because Bepin Babu had all the money and luxuries in the world and he refused to help Chunilal out. So Chunilal decided to take away the one thing that Bepin Babu valued the most, which was his brain and mental well-being. So there are a lot of different elements to the story. It's not just a funny story, haha, about a prank. There are many ways in which you can analyze the story and learn a lot from it. So if you have a newer perspective, if there's something else that you understood from this story, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And in the next session, we will be answering some questions from your textbook. And so your perception, your perspective, and your analysis of the story will also help you come up with better answers. So a lot of times in English, especially in any kind of a language, there's not one right or wrong answer. It's a matter of perspective. So keep your mind open and read everything, all your content that you read it with an open mind and try to see it from as many different angles as possible. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much. Before I take your leave, do join Telegram. The links are in the description, and the host of benefits that you get. You get revision questions, session notes, fun facts, quizzes, homework questions, and whatnot. And most importantly, you get all your session updates, so you never miss out on a session. So definitely join our Telegram channel. As always, we've got you covered. So do like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon to get all regular updates. Check out BYJU'S classes with 2 teacher advantage. You know all the advantages that you get. So for all those of you who haven't, for all those of you who are new here, definitely give this a shot. Download BYJU'S, a learning app. Lots of interesting things for you to do in the app. And check out BYJU'S scholarship test. You can register for free. Happens every Sunday and you can benefit a lot from this. So definitely don't miss out on all these amazing opportunities. All links are in the description. And see you next time. Have a great day ahead.